They told the world she was broken, a 6-year-old vampire princess, locked in eternal silence. Deaf, they said. Defective. A crack in a bloodline that had survived empires, plagues, and 2 world wars. Lord Lucian Corvus, the most feared immortal on the eastern seaboard, had given up hope. For 80 years he had watched his daughter exist in a soundless void, unresponsive, unreachable. A living ghost in a house built on memories of the dead. But when Dr. Cassandra Brennan walked through the iron gates of Corvus Hall on a rain-soaked October night in 2024, she saw something no one else had bothered to look for. The child wasn't deaf. She was terrified, and the reason why was about to tear apart everything the vampire world believed to be true. The rain in Boston didn't wash things clean, it just made the shadows deeper. Cassandra Brennan stood at the base of Corvus Hall's entrance, staring up at the gothic monstrosity that seemed to swallow the autumn twilight. The mansion perched on a cliff overlooking Massachusetts Bay, all black stone and sharp angles, its windows dark despite the early evening hour. No lights, no warmth, just the skeletal outline of a fortress built to keep the world out, or to keep something in. Cass tightened her grip on the strap of her duffel bag. 42 years old, former Army combat surgeon. 2 tours in Iraq. A medical discharge after a mortar round took out half her field hospital in Fallujah. She'd sewn soldiers back together under rocket fire. She'd held 19-year-old boys while they bled out on sand that couldn't be sanitized. But standing here, in the cold Massachusetts rain, she felt something she hadn't felt in a decade. Fear. Not the sharp, immediate fear of incoming fire. This was older, deeper. The kind of fear that lives in the bones, passed down through generations who knew what it meant when the predators came out of the dark. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospice nurse back in Providence. Emma's fever spiking again. 103.2. We're managing, but she's asking for you. Cass closed her eyes. Emma, 8 years old. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 4. Her sister's daughter, and the only family Cass had left after Sarah died 6 months ago, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt and a little girl who still believed adults could fix anything. $480,000. That's what the experimental treatment cost. The one the insurance wouldn't cover. The one that gave Emma a 43% chance of seeing her 9th birthday. $480,000. And Cass had $37 in her checking account. The contract in her jacket pocket promised $150,000 per year. Live-in medical caretaker for a special needs child. High-risk environment. Hazard pay included. Sign a 3-year non-disclosure agreement, and the first year's salary would be paid up front. Enough to start Emma's treatment. Enough to buy time. Cass had stopped asking herself what kind of desperate she'd become. Desperation had a taste now. Metallic, like the blood that soaked through gauze faster than you could pack it. Desperation was the choice between watching a child die or walking into a house that felt like a crypt. She pressed the call button on the intercom. Static crackled. Then a voice, British accent clipped sharp enough to cut. State your business. Dr. Cassandra Brennan. I have an appointment with Lord Corvus. Silence. Long enough that Cass thought about turning around. Long enough that she almost convinced herself there were other options, other ways to save Emma that didn't involve. The gates groaned open. No turning back now. The driveway stretched a quarter-mile through grounds that looked like they hadn't been tended in decades. Ancient oak trees, their branches skeletal and reaching. Overgrown ivy consuming what might have once been garden walls. In the failing light, Cass could see statues, marble figures half hidden in the undergrowth, their faces worn smooth by weather and time. All of them were looking away from the house. By the time she reached the entrance, the rain had soaked through her jacket. Her boots squelched on the marble steps. The front doors were oak, easily 12 feet tall, with iron handles shaped like ravens in flight. The door opened before she could knock. The woman standing there looked like she'd been carved from ice. Tall, rail-thin, wearing a severe black dress that might have been fashionable in 1920. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her skin was the kind of pale that didn't come from makeup or illness. It was the pallor of something that had never seen sunlight. "You are late, Dr. Brennan." Not a question, an accusation. "The GPS had trouble finding the address," Cass lied. The truth was, she'd sat in her car at the bottom of the hill for 20 minutes, trying to convince herself this wasn't insane. "I am Mrs. Thorne, head of household staff." The woman's eyes, a washed-out gray, traveled down Cass's body in a single, dismissive sweep. "You are the 8th applicant this month. The previous 7 fled before sunrise. I trust you will not make me clean up after another failure." 8th. Christ. "I don't scare easily," Cass said. Mrs. Thorne's lips twitched, almost a smile, but devoid of anything resembling warmth. "We shall see." The interior of Corvus Hall hit like a wall of cold. The temperature had to be at least 15 degrees lower than outside. Cass's breath misted in front of her face. The entrance hall was dominated by a grand staircase that spiraled up into darkness. The walls were lined with portraits, oil paintings of men and women who all shared the same aristocratic features: sharp jawlines, high cheekbones, and eyes. Every single portrait had those same unsettling violet eyes, capturing light in a way that made them seem to glow. The air smelled wrong. Old books, certainly, stone and dust. But underneath, something organic, copper and ozone, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Lord Corvus is waiting in the study," Mrs. Thorne said, already moving down a corridor lined with more portraits. "Do not look him directly in the eye unless he addresses you first. Do not offer physical contact. And above all, do not mention his late wife. Is that understood?" Cass had treated trauma patients for years. She recognized the warning signs of a household walking on eggshells around someone's grief. "Understood." They stopped at a set of mahogany double doors. Mrs. Thorne knocked twice, a sharp rap that echoed. "Enter!" The voice from inside was deep, not loud, but it carried a weight that Cass felt in her chest. Mrs. Thorne pushed open the doors and stepped aside. "The applicant, my lord." Cass walked into the study. It was a library, really. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 3 walls, filled with volumes that looked centuries old. A fireplace dominated the 4th wall, but the fire had burned down to embers, providing almost no heat. Rain streaked the tall windows, distorting the view of the ocean beyond. And sitting in a leather wingback chair near the dying fire was a man who made the room feel smaller. Lucian Corvus. He didn't stand. He sat perfectly still, a book open in his lap, one hand holding a glass of something dark red that definitely wasn't wine. He was tall, even sitting down Cass could tell, easily 6.5 feet. Broad shoulders under a charcoal suit that fit like it had been tailored by someone who understood proportion and power. His hair was black, touched with gray at the temples, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from marble. But it was the eyes that made Cass's breath catch. Violet, not blue or gray that caught the light wrong. Actual violet, the color of deep bruises or twilight storms. Ancient eyes, in a face that looked no older than 40. He didn't look up from his book. "You are human." Not a question. A statement of fact, delivered with the same inflection someone might use to note the weather. "Yes, sir." "Former military. Army, based on the way you stand. Combat deployment, based on the scar tissue on your hands and the way your eyes map the exits." Cass glanced at her hands. The burn scars from the Fallujah incident were faded but visible. She'd stopped trying to hide them years ago. "Iraq, 2 tours, combat surgeon." "And you are desperate." Now he looked up. Those violet eyes locked onto her, and Cass understood why Mrs. Thorne had warned her. It was like being seen by something that could calculate exactly how many pints of blood she carried, how fast her heart was beating, how quickly she could run, and how easily she could be caught. "I have debts," Cass said, keeping her voice level. "Medical bills. My niece. She's 8. Leukemia. The experimental treatment isn't covered by insurance." $480,000, Lucian said. paid to Children's Hospital Boston over the last 6 months, with another $200,000 projected for the next phase of treatment. Your sister died intestate. You assumed guardianship and financial responsibility. Your salary as an ER physician at Providence General is insufficient. You've applied for 17 loans, all denied. Cass's hands clenched. You've been checking up on me. I have been employing reasonable caution. He closed the book with a soft thud. The last caretaker I hired attempted to sell photographs to a tabloid. The one before that tried to kill my daughter with a silver knife. Before you judge me for invasion of privacy, Doctor, Brennan, understand that I am not hiring you to make coffee. I am hiring you to care for the only thing in this world I have left to love. He stood. The movement was fluid, too smooth. One moment sitting, the next standing right in front of her, and Cass hadn't even seen the transition. She didn't step back. Army training, never show fear to the enemy, even if the enemy was 8 inches taller and looked at her like she was made of glass. Tell me what you know about my daughter, Lucian said. Cass had done her research, what little there was. Lyra Corvus, 6 years old, diagnosed deaf, nonverbal, requires around-the-clock supervision. 80 years old, Lucian corrected quietly. Born October 13, 1944, during the London Blitz. German Phi-2 rockets falling on the city like rain. My wife went into labor in a tube station while the world exploded overhead. His voice didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Old pain, the kind that had calcified into permanent scar tissue. Isolde died 3 hours after Lyra was born. Blood fever, the physician said, a complication of vampire childbirth. Rare, but fatal. He turned away, walking toward the window. Lyra didn't cry, not once. The healers examined her, told me her auditory nerves were dead. Complete sensorineural deafness, no hope of recovery. Vampires age differently, Cass said, processing. She's 80, but still a child, yes. Our aging slows dramatically after birth. Lyra has the body and mind of a 6-year-old human, and she will for another century or more. He pressed one hand against the window glass, the rain streaming down the other side. I have sung to her, Dr. Brennan. Every night for 80 years, I have sat by her bedside and sung the lullabies her mother would have sung. I have hired the finest musicians in the world. I have fired cannons outside her window. I have done everything short of shattering her eardrums with explosives, and she has never once responded. The grief in his voice was a living thing, raw, even after 8 decades. My counsel believes she is weak, a liability. They will be gathering here in 5 days for the Covenant Gala, our annual parliament. They will assess Lyra's fitness to inherit, and they will find her wanting because a deaf heir is a broken heir. Do you understand what I am asking of you? Cass met his eyes. Violet, ancient, drowning in loss. You want me to keep her alive, keep her clean, make her presentable enough that they don't strip her inheritance. I want you to keep her safe, Lucian said. The rest is window dressing. He moved again, that same impossible speed, and suddenly he was right in front of her, close enough that she could smell him. Rain and cedar and something sharp, like ozone before a storm. Can you do that, Doctor? Brennan? Can you protect a child who lives in silence in a house full of predators who see her as prey? Cass thought of Emma, pale and small in a hospital bed, asking when Aunt Cass was coming home. Yes, she said. I can. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, once. Mrs. Thorne will show you to the nursery. Lyra is waiting. The west wing of Corvus Hall felt like a different building. Where the main house was all dark wood and Gothic grandeur, this section was bare stone, utilitarian. The walls were thick enough to dampen sound, and the temperature dropped another few degrees. Mrs. Thorne led Cass up a narrow staircase, her footsteps echoing. The child's quarters are isolated by design, the housekeeper said. She requires minimal stimulation. Bright lights distress her. Loud noises are not a concern, obviously, but Lord Corvus prefers a quiet environment regardless. They stopped at a heavy oak door, reinforced with iron bands. Meals are at 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 6 p.m. She is not a picky eater, But you must ensure she finishes her portions. She takes her medicine at 9 p.m. sharp. Do not miss a dose." "Medicine?" Cass asked. "For what condition?" Mrs. Thorne's expression hardened. "Lady Seraphina prescribes it personally. It keeps the child calm. Do not question the dosage." "Who is Lady Seraphina?" "Lord Corvus's sister-in-law. She has managed the household medical needs since Lady Isolda's passing. You would do well not to interfere with established protocols, Dr. Brennan." Before Cass could respond, Mrs. Thorne unlocked the door and pushed it open. "The child is inside. I will return with your dinner at 7. She left, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Cass stood in the doorway, her medical bag in one hand, and looked into what could only be described as a gilded cage. The nursery was enormous. Expensive furniture, antique dolls displayed on shelves, toys that looked like they'd never been touched. Heavy velvet curtains blocked most of the windows, leaving the room in perpetual twilight. A 4-poster bed dominated one corner, canopy draped with silk. And sitting in the center of the room, on a plush Persian rug, was the smallest child Cass had ever seen, Lyra Corvus. She was tiny, delicate, like a porcelain doll. Her hair was platinum blonde, so pale it was almost white, falling in soft waves to her shoulders. She wore a stiff lace dress, cream-colored, that looked uncomfortable and expensive. Her skin had the same alabaster pallor as her father's, translucent enough that Cass could see the faint tracery of veins at her temples. She was stacking wooden blocks, picking them up with careful precision, balancing them in a tower. Her movements were methodical, almost robotic. She didn't look up when Cass entered. "Hi, Lyra," Cass said softly. Then, remembering, she moved to where the child could see her. Lyra's eyes were violet, just like her father's. But where Lucian's held ancient grief, Lyra's were empty. Not vacant. There was intelligence there. But it was buried under something else. Something that looked like resignation. Cass knelt down on the rug, putting herself at Lyra's level. She signed as she spoke, using the ASL she'd learned years ago when her cousin had lost his hearing in a factory accident. "My name is Cassandra. I'm going to be staying here with you." Lyra didn't react. Her hands continued stacking blocks. Red on blue, blue on yellow, yellow on green. Perfect geometric precision. Cass waved her hand gently in Lyra's line of sight. Nothing. She tried tapping the floor, creating a vibration. Nothing. The child stacked her blocks like Cass didn't exist, like she was a ghost. Cass sat back on her heels, watching. In combat medicine, you learned to read patients who couldn't speak. Body language, micro-expressions, the way they held tension. Lyra's shoulders were tight. Her breathing was shallow, and every few seconds her eyes would flick toward the door, then back to her blocks. Not catatonic, not unaware. Afraid. The afternoon bled into evening. Lyra played with her blocks, then moved to the window seat, staring out at the rain. She never made a sound. No humming, no unconscious vocalizations, nothing. It was unnatural. Even profoundly deaf children made noise. They couldn't hear themselves, so they didn't know to be silent. Lyra's silence was learned. At 6 p.m., a servant Cass hadn't met brought a tray of food. For Lyra, small pieces of rare steak, arranged precisely. A goblet of something thick and red that definitely wasn't juice. For Cass, sandwiches and tea. Cass watched Lyra eat. Mechanical. Each piece of meat cut the same size, chewed the same number of times, swallowed with the same blank expression. Like a trained animal. At 7:30 p.m., the door opened again. The woman who entered brought a wave of perfume with her. Heavy, cloying, roses and something underneath, something that made Cass's nose wrinkle. Decay. She was stunning. Red hair that cascaded down her back in perfect waves, a dress of deep crimson silk that clung to her curves, pale skin, high cheekbones, full lips painted darker red, and those same violet eyes, though hers held a different light, calculating. "You must be the new help," the woman said, her accent British, upper class. "I am Lady Seraphina Vale." Cass stood. Dr. Cassandra Brennan. A doctor, how quaint. Seraphina glided past her, moving toward Lyra. "And how is our little princess this evening?" She reached down and placed a hand on Lyra's head. Lyra flinched. It was tiny. A micro-movement, barely visible. But Cass had spent years watching for signs of trauma in soldiers who'd learned to hide it. She saw. Seraphina didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. She stroked Lyra's hair, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Still so listless," she sighed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Poor Lucian, to be the lord of the night, and produce this." She turned back to Cass, pulling a small crystal vial from a pocket in her dress. "It is nearly time for her medicine. Dr. Corbin prepared the tincture. 3 drops, no more, no less. It helps with her constitution, keeps her calm." Seraphina placed the vial on the mantelpiece, her fingers lingering on it. "If she becomes agitated, call me immediately. We cannot have her disturbing the household." She swept toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Dr. Brennan, do not become too attached. The council has been discussing long-term solutions for everyone's safety." The door closed behind her, leaving a cold draft in her wake. Cass walked to the mantelpiece and picked up the vial. The liquid inside swirled, iridescent purple, catching the lamplight. She unscrewed the cap and sniffed. Her medical training kicked in immediately. Nightshade, definitely. The distinctive bitter alkaloid scent. And something else. Metallic. She'd smelled it before, in the field, when soldiers came in with heavy metal poisoning from contaminated water. Lead. This wasn't medicine. This was poison. Slow-acting, accumulative. Enough to dull the nervous system, create chemical dependency, erode cognitive function over time. 80 years of this. Cass looked at Lyra. The child had stopped playing. She was sitting perfectly still, staring at the vial in Cass's hand. And in those violet eyes, for the first time, Cass saw something clear. Pleading. "Time for medicine, Lyra," Cass said, loud enough to be heard if anyone was listening. She picked up the silver spoon from the tray, measured out 3 drops of the purple liquid. Lyra's eyes followed the spoon. Her small hands clenched into fists. Cass made a decision, the kind of decision that could get her fired, or worse. But she'd made harder choices in field hospitals, choosing which soldiers had a chance and which ones were already gone. She walked to the corner of the room, to a large potted fern that looked half dead already, and poured the 3 drops into the soil. Then she filled the spoon with water from a pitcher, walked back to Lyra, and pretended to administer it. "All done," Cass said clearly, for the benefit of any listening ears. She tucked Lyra into the massive canopy bed, the child's body small and fragile under layers of silk. "Good night, Lyra." Cass retreated to the small adjoining room that served as her quarters. Bare walls, a narrow bed, a single window overlooking the cliff. She lay down fully clothed, leaving the door cracked open so she could hear if Lyra needed her. The house settled around her. Old wood creaking, wind rattling windows, the distant sound of the ocean against rocks. She thought about Emma, small and bald from chemotherapy, asking when they could go home. She thought about the vial of poison and the woman who'd delivered it with a smile. She thought about Lyra's eyes, pleading, aware. Cass had seen a lot of evil in her life. Insurgents who'd killed children, officers who'd covered up war crimes, bureaucrats who'd denied medical care to soldiers who'd earned it with blood. But something about this house, this family, this carefully orchestrated routine of slow murder dressed up as medicine. The clock in the hallway struck midnight, and from Lyra's room, Cass heard something that made her blood freeze. Humming, soft, tentative, but unmistakable. A melody, the same lullaby Cass had been humming absently while she'd drawn Lyra's bath earlier. "Hush, little baby." But that wasn't what made Cass sit bolt upright. It was the other sound. The glass of water on her nightstand was rippling, perfect concentric circles spreading from the center. The window pane rattled in its frame, a low vibration that Cass felt in her teeth. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with static electricity that made the hair on her arms stand up. Cass got up and moved to the doorway between their rooms. Lyra was sitting up in bed, bathed in moonlight from a gap in the curtains. Her eyes were open, glowing faintly in the dark. And she was humming, her mouth barely moving, but the sound was everywhere. Not coming from her throat, coming from the air itself. The melody rose, and a porcelain doll on the shelf across the room began to vibrate. Then crack, fine fractures spreading across its face like a spider web. Lyra stopped humming abruptly, her eyes wide, her hand flying to her mouth. Silence crashed back down. The doll stopped vibrating. The water stilled. The air returned to normal. Lyra looked at Cass, and in that moment, in the darkness of a nursery that was really a prison, Cass understood. The child wasn't deaf. She was powerful, and someone had been poisoning her for 80 years to make sure no one ever found out. Cass didn't sleep. She sat in the chair by her window, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to gray, her mind racing. 80 years, since 1944, since Lyra was born and Isolde died. Who benefits? Serafina, sister-in-law, the one who prescribes the medicine, the one positioned to take control if Lyra is declared incompetent. But why? What does a 6-year-old child with the power to shatter objects with sound represent that's so dangerous it needs to be suppressed for 8 decades? At dawn, Cass went to check the potted fern. It was dead. Not wilted, not drooping. Dead. The green fronds had turned black, brittle as charcoal. The soil smelled of burned copper. When Cass touched a leaf, it crumbled to ash. 3 drops. 3 drops had done this overnight. 80 years of 3 drops. Jesus Christ. There was a soft sound behind her. Cass turned. Lyra stood in the doorway of her bedroom wearing a white nightgown, her platinum hair mussed from sleep. She was staring at the dead plant. Then she looked up at Cass, and very slowly, very deliberately, she pressed one finger to her lips. Shh. Then she pointed at the door to the hallway. 3 seconds later, Cass heard footsteps. Mrs. Thorne coming down the corridor. Lyra had heard her. From 2 floors away, through stone walls, she had heard the housekeepers approach and warned Cass. The child wasn't deaf. She was the opposite. The door opened. Mrs. Thorne entered with a breakfast tray, her expression as severe as ever. "Lord Corvus requests your presence in the solarium while the child eats, Dr. Brennan. Do not keep him waiting." Cass nodded, glancing at Lyra. The girl had already returned to her bed, her face gone blank again, the perfect mask of a broken child. But as Cass left the room, she saw it, a tiny flicker in those violet eyes. Hope. The solarium was a contradiction. Glass walls on 3 sides, letting in the pale October morning light, but the air inside was cold enough to frost breath. Exotic plants filled the space, Venus flytraps, pitcher plants, things with thorns and teeth. Carnivorous beauty. Lucian Corvus stood by the eastern window, silhouetted against the gray Atlantic. He'd removed his suit jacket. White shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle and marked with scars. Old scars, the kind that came from blades, not accidents. He didn't turn when Cass entered. "How was her night?" His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Quiet, sir." The lie came smoothly. Years of lying to commanding officers had made Cass good at it. "She slept through." "You are lying." Cass froze. Lucian turned. Those violet eyes locked onto her, and she felt the weight of 6.5 centuries of reading human deception. "I can hear your heart, Dr. Brennan. It skips when you lie. Right now it is beating like a trapped rabbit." He took a step toward her. "Did she have an episode? Did she hurt herself?" "No," Cass said. That at least was true. She didn't hurt herself. But something happened. The air in the room grew heavier. The temperature dropped another degree. This was what apex predators felt like when they decided whether you were prey or not worth the effort. Cass made a calculation. She'd spent 2 tours learning when to follow orders and when to trust her instincts. Right now, her instincts were screaming that this man, this creature, loved his daughter more than he feared the truth. "She seemed more alert than you described," Cass said carefully. Aware, responsive in small ways. Lucian's expression flickered. For a moment something raw and desperate crossed his face, then it vanished behind the mask of lordly control. "Hope is a cruel thing, Dr. Brennan," he said, his voice gone brittle. "I have consulted the finest healers in the immortal world, physicians from Vienna, neurologists from Tokyo, shamans from the Amazon who claim to speak to the spirits of the dead. All of them examined Lyra. All of them confirmed the same diagnosis. Her auditory nerves are dead. She is deaf. Completely. Irreversibly." He walked to a shelf and picked up a crystal decanter, pouring amber liquid into a glass. His hand shook just slightly. "Do you know what it is like, Dr. Brennan, to sing to your child every night for 80 years and never once see recognition in her eyes? To hire orchestras, fire cannons, scream yourself hoarse, and receive nothing but that same blank stare?" "I can't imagine," Cass said softly. "No, you cannot." He downed the drink in one swallow. "I have tried everything. Music therapy, experimental surgeries, mystical rituals that required blood sacrifices I will not describe. Nothing. She does not hear. To suggest otherwise is not just false hope. It is cruelty." Cass watched him. Saw the grief, yes. But underneath, saw something else. Guilt. The kind of guilt that came from believing you'd failed the one person you were supposed to protect. "With respect, sir," Cass said, "maybe she's not broken. Maybe she's just overwhelmed." Lucian's head snapped toward her. "Explain." "You said you've tried everything. Orchestras, cannons, screaming, all of it loud, aggressive, demanding a response." Cass chose her words carefully. "But what if the problem isn't that she can't hear? What if it's that she hears too much? That makes no sense. In combat medicine, we saw soldiers with traumatic brain injuries. Sometimes their sensory processing would malfunction. Lights too bright, sounds too loud, touch painful. They'd shut down, go catatonic. Not because they couldn't perceive stimuli, but because they perceived too much, and the only way to survive was to disconnect." Lucian stared at her. "You are suggesting Lyra has been shutting down for 80 years? I'm suggesting it's possible." He moved with that blurring speed, suddenly inches from her face. Cass's training screamed at her to step back, but she held her ground. "Do not do this," Lucian said, his voice low and dangerous. "Do not give me hope and then take it away. I have buried that hope in the same grave as my wife. If you dig it up without cause—" "I saw her react to a sound last night," Cass said. "The water pipes. They made a high-pitched squeal. She covered her ears." Lucian went very still. "Covered her ears." "Yes. Deaf children do not cover their ears, Dr. Brennan." "No, sir, they don't." The silence stretched between them. Outside, gulls cried over the ocean. Inside, Cass could hear her own heartbeat, and knew Lucian could hear it too. "Show me," he said finally. They stood in Lyra's bathroom. The child sat on her bed in the adjoining room, visible through the open door, stacking her blocks with the same mechanical precision. "The pipes are old," Cass said quietly. "When you turn the tap too fast, they squeal. High frequency. Painful if you have sensitive hearing." She reached for the tap. Lucian caught her wrist. His grip was gentle, but she felt the strength in it, enough to snap her bones like dry kindling. "If you are wrong," he said, "if this is some elaborate deception to secure your employment, I will know. And you will regret it." "I'm not wrong." He released her. Cass turned the tap hard. The pipes groaned, then let out a high-pitched squeal, the kind that made even her teeth ache. Lyra's hands flew to her ears, her eyes squeezed shut. Her mouth opened in what looked like a scream, but no sound came out. Her whole body went rigid, trembling. Cass shut off the water immediately. Lyra lowered her hands slowly, her breathing ragged. She looked at them standing in the bathroom doorway. Her eyes were wide with fear and guilt, the look of a child who'd just revealed a secret she was supposed to keep. Then, realizing her mistake, her face went blank again. The mask slammed down. She turned back to her blocks, hands shaking slightly, and resumed stacking. Lucian stood frozen. Cass watched his face, saw the calculations happening behind those ancient eyes, denial warring with hope, warring with a century of grief. "Do it again," he whispered. "Sir, it clearly causes her pain." "Do it again." Cass turned the tap. The squeal cut through the air. Lyra flinched, but this time she didn't raise her hands. She sat rigid, enduring, her jaw clenched so tight Cass could see the muscles jumping. Lucian moved. He walked into the nursery, slowly, like approaching a wild animal. He knelt in front of his daughter, putting himself in her line of sight. "Lyra," he said softly. "Baby girl, can you hear me?" Lyra stared through him. Perfect blankness. But her hands, hidden in her lap, were clenched into fists so tight her knuckles were white. Lucian reached out and gently took one of those small fists, uncurled the fingers, held her hand in his. "It is all right," he murmured. "It is all right to hear. I promise. No one will hurt you." Lyra's eyes flickered. Just for a second they focused on his face, really looked at him. Then she pulled her hand away and went back to her blocks. Lucian stood slowly, turned to Cass. His expression was unreadable. "Leave us," he said. "Sir, leave, now." Cass left. She stood in the hallway, ear pressed to the door, heard nothing for a long moment. Then, so quiet she almost missed it, a sound that made her chest tighten. Weeping. Deep, wrenching sobs. The kind of crying that came from 8 decades of grief finally finding release. Lord Lucian Corvus, the most feared vampire on the eastern seaboard, was on his knees in his daughter's nursery, crying like the world had just ended, or just begun again. An hour later, Lucian found Cass in the library. She was researching, pulling medical texts off the shelves, making notes. He looked different, composed again, but there was something fragile in his eyes, something raw. "Hyperacusis," Cass said without preamble. She held up an old medical journal. "Extreme sensitivity to sound. In humans, it's rare, usually caused by nerve damage or certain medications. Sounds that are normal to most people become painful, unbearable. The sufferer often withdraws, avoids stimuli. In severe cases, they can appear catatonic." She set down the journal and met his eyes. "If vampires have enhanced senses to begin with, and Lyra has hyperacusis on top of that, sir, she's not hearing nothing. She's hearing everything. Every footstep 3 floors down, every heartbeat in the house, every wave hitting the cliff. It's not silence she lives in. It's a constant assault of noise. The only way to survive would be to shut down completely." Lucian sat down heavily in a leather chair. He looked smaller somehow, mortal. 80 years, he whispered. 80 years, and I thought she was broken, defective. I mourned the daughter I thought I'd lost." His hands clenched on the armrests. "But she was there, aware, suffering, and I filled her world with more noise, trying to force a response, making it worse." "You didn't know," Cass said. "I should have known." The words came out as a roar. The windows rattled. "I am her father. I should have—" He stopped, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, but barely. "The medicine, the tincture Serafina has been giving her. What is it?" Cass had been waiting for this question, dreading it. "Nightshade and lead acetate, among other things. It's a neural suppressant. It would dull all sensory input, make the world quieter. But the dosage in that vial is strong enough to cause cumulative damage, cognitive impairment, chemical dependency. Over time, it would essentially lobotomize her. 80 years of it." "Yes." Lucian's face went very still. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerously soft. "My sister-in-law has been poisoning my daughter. It's possible she thought she was helping. If Lyra was in constant pain from overstimulation, maybe Serafina found a way to ease it. Or," Lucian interrupted, "she found a way to ensure Lyra remained incompetent, unable to inherit, leaving Serafina positioned as regent over the Corvus fortune until Lyra comes of age, which, given vampire aging, would be 3 or 4 more centuries. The temperature in the room dropped. Frost formed on the windows. "How much is the Corvus estate worth, Dr. Brennan?" "I don't know, sir." 50 million in liquid assets. Another 200 million in properties, investments, and holdings accumulated over 6 centuries. Serafina has been managing it since Isolde died, as Lyra's guardian, drawing a management fee of 15% annually. He stood, walked to the window. $7.5 million a year, for 80 years, and all she had to do was keep a little girl drugged and silent. Cass felt cold, not from the temperature, from understanding. "The Covenant Gala," she said, "in 5 days. That's when the council will assess Lyra." "Yes. If they declare her incompetent, what happens?" Lucian's reflection in the window glass was a ghost. "Serafina becomes permanent guardian. Lyra is institutionalized for her own safety, and I am removed from my position for gross negligence in allowing a defective heir to jeopardize the bloodline." He turned. "That is what Serafina has been working toward for 8 decades, and I have been too blind with grief to see it." "Then we stop her." "We?" Cass stepped forward. "You hired me to protect Lyra. That's what I'm going to do. But I need your help, and we need to start now." Lucian studied her. "You realize what you are proposing. If we stop the medicine, Lyra will withdraw. The sensory overload will be excruciating. She may lash out, hurt herself, hurt others. Or," Cass said, "we teach her to control it. I've treated soldiers with PTSD, combat trauma. The brain can learn to filter stimuli, build walls, create safe spaces. It takes time and training, but it's possible." "In 5 days?" "We work with what we have." Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "What do you need?" "First, your war stories." He blinked. "Excuse me?" "You fought in World War II, World War I before that. You survived, you adapted. You learned to function in environments of constant noise and chaos. I need to know how you did it, because that's what we're going to teach Lyra." They worked in the solarium. Lyra sat between them, small and pale, watching with those too intelligent violet eyes. Lucian talked, and Cass listened. "Verdun, 1917, he said, his voice distant. "The longest battle of the First World War. 10 months of constant artillery bombardment. The noise was indescribable. Thunder that never stopped. Men went mad from it, clawed their own ears bloody trying to make it stop." He looked at Lyra. "I learned to find silence in the chaos, to focus on one sound and let the others fade. The beating of my own heart, the rhythm of my breath. I built a wall in my mind, and behind that wall the world was quiet." Cass leaned forward. "Can you teach that?" "I do not know. I have never tried." "Try now." Lucian knelt in front of Lyra. "Baby girl, I know the world is loud. I know it hurts. But you are stronger than the noise. You are Corvus. We have survived empires falling. We can survive this." He placed a hand over his chest. "Listen to my heartbeat. Just that. Block everything else out. Focus." Lyra stared at him. Then slowly she reached out and placed her small hand over his. "That is it," Lucian murmured. "Feel the rhythm. Thump, 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 like a drum. Steady, constant. Let that be your anchor." Cass watched. In the silence she could hear the old house settling, wind rattling windows, distant ocean, and something else, a sound that didn't belong. Footsteps, coming up the hallway, heels on stone, click, click, click. Lyra's eyes widened. Her hand started to fly to her ears. "No," Lucian said gently. "Do not block it out. Build the wall. Behind the wall, you are safe. Behind the wall, there is only my heartbeat." The footsteps grew louder. Lyra trembled, but her hand stayed on her father's chest. The door opened. Serafina swept in, crimson dress, red hair, violet eyes, sharp as knives. "Lucian, darling, we need to discuss the gala arrangements. The council arrives in—" She stopped, saw them gathered, saw Lyra with her hand on Lucian's chest. "What is going on here?" "Family time," Lucian said smoothly, standing. "Dr. Brennan suggested engagement therapy. Lyra seems calmer with physical contact." Serafina's eyes narrowed. She walked to the mantelpiece in Lyra's room, visible through the open door, picked up the crystal vial. It was still full from last night. "She has not had her medicine," Serafina said, her voice gone cold. "Doctor Brennan, I gave explicit instructions. I gave it to her at 9 p.m. as directed," Cass lied. "This vial is full. I refilled it this morning, from the supply in the medical cabinet." Serafina studied her. Cass kept her expression neutral, her heartbeat steady. Years of lying to insurgents who'd put guns to her head had taught her how. "I see," Serafina said finally. She set down the vial. "How fortunate that you are so thorough, Dr. Brennan. We cannot have Lyra missing doses. The consequences could be severe." She glided to Lyra, knelt down, grabbed the child's chin, forcing Lyra to look at her. "Still so vacant," Serafina murmured. "Still so lost." Lyra sat perfectly still, but Cass saw it, the tiny tremor in her hands, the way her breathing quickened. Fear, deep, primal fear. And something else happened, something Cass almost missed. The crystal vial on the mantel cracked, a single hairline fracture running from rim to base. Serafina didn't notice. She released Lyra and stood. "The gala is in 5 days. I trust you will have her presentable, Dr. Brennan. Clean, docile, medicated." "Of course, Lady Serafina." "Good." She walked to the door, paused. "Oh, and Lucian? The council has requested a private audience with you. Tonight. They have concerns about the succession." Lucian's expression didn't change. "I will attend." "I thought you might." Serafina smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "After all, one must maintain appearances, even when the foundation is crumbling." She left. The temperature in the room slowly returned to normal. Lyra looked at the cracked vial, then at Cass, then at her father, and for the first time in 80 years, she smiled. It was small, tentative, like sun breaking through storm clouds, but it was real. That night, after Lucian left for his council meeting, Cass worked with Lyra. No more medicine. The withdrawal would be brutal but necessary. Already Cass could see the difference. Lyra was more alert. Her eyes tracked movement. When Cass spoke, the child's gaze fixed on her lips, reading them. "I know it is loud," Cass said softly, signing as she spoke. "I know it hurts, but we are going to teach you to control it." She pulled out a notebook, drew a simple diagram, a circle with a dial, like a volume knob. "Imagine this in your mind. When the world gets too loud, you turn the dial down. Not off, just down, to a level you can handle." Lyra stared at the drawing. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched it. "That is right," Cass said. "Your control, your dial. No one else gets to touch it." They practiced. Cass would make a sound, clap hands, drop a book, tap the table, and Lyra would try to filter it. Not flinch, not shut down, just adjust. It was hard. Lyra's face would pinch with concentration, her hands trembling. But slowly, incrementally, she improved. By midnight, Cass could drop a book 3 feet behind Lyra, and the child wouldn't react. Progress. "Good girl," Cass said. "You are so strong, Lyra, stronger than anyone knows." Lyra looked at her, and then, so quiet Cass almost missed it, the child's lips moved. No sound came out, but Cass could read the word. "Help." Cass felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, I am going to help. I promise." Lyra reached out, took Cass's hand, held it tight. They sat there in the darkness, a broken child and a desperate woman holding on to each other like lifelines, and neither of them heard the footsteps in the hallway. The door creaked open. Mrs. Thorne stood there, backlit by hall lights. In her hand was a phone, screen glowing. She'd been recording. "Lady Serafina will be most interested in this development," the housekeeper said coldly. Most interested indeed. Over the next 3 days, Cass lived in constant fear of discovery. Every footstep in the hallway made her jump. Every time Serafina visited, Cass expected to be fired. Or worse. But nothing happened. Mrs. Thorne said nothing. Serafina asked no questions. The household continued its cold, mechanical routine. It made Cass more nervous than an outright confrontation would have. They were waiting, building a case, letting Cass gather enough rope to hang herself. But Cass didn't stop, couldn't stop, because Lyra was improving. By day 2, the child could sit through normal household noises without shutting down. The clink of silverware, doors closing, wind through the eaves. By day 3, she could tolerate music. Cass played recordings, Mozart, Bach, gentle piano. Lyra would wince at first, then slowly relax as she found her mental volume control. And on the morning of day 4, something miraculous happened. Cass was reading aloud, a children's story about a girl who could speak to animals. Lyra sat beside her on the bed, following along. Halfway through a sentence, Lyra's hand shot up. Cass stopped. "What is it?" Lyra's mouth moved, forming sounds carefully like someone learning a foreign language. "Wrong," she whispered. Her voice was tiny, rusty from disuse. The bird. Wrong kind. For that forest." Cass stared. "You can read?" Lyra nodded. Then her eyes went wide, terrified, like she'd revealed too much. "It's okay," Cass said quickly. "It's good. It's amazing. You've been able to read this whole time?" Another nod. "How long?" Lyra held up fingers. "All 10. Then all 10 again. Then again. Then again. Then again. Then again. Then again. Then again. 80 years." "You've been aware for 80 years, Cass said slowly. "Reading, listening, understanding everything." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "And you couldn't say anything?" She said," Lyra's voice cracked, if I showed, she would make it hurt. More. Forever." "Serafina." Cass pulled Lyra into her arms. "She's not going to hurt you anymore. I promise. Your father and I were going to protect you." "Papa doesn't know," Lyra whispered. "He thinks broken." "He knows now. He knows you're not broken. You're brilliant and brave and so strong." Lyra clung to her, sobbing silently. 80 years of fear and loneliness finally breaking through. That evening, Lucian returned from another council meeting looking grim. "Elder Wilhelm pulled me aside," he said. "Someone has been feeding the council information, suggesting that Lyra's condition is worsening, that I'm in denial about her prognosis." "Serafina," Cass said. "Almost certainly. Wilhelm wouldn't tell me who, but he warned me that several council members are already leaning toward supporting her petition for guardianship." He walked to the window, hands clenched behind his back. "I spoke with Dr. Corbin today, the royal physician, the one who's been preparing Serafina's tincture for 80 years. And he is terrified, refused to speak at first, but I persuaded him." Lucian's expression darkened. "He admitted that Serafina provides the formula. He merely compounds it. When I asked about the ingredients, he showed me the list. Nightshade, lead acetate, hemlock, mandrake, all in quantities far exceeding therapeutic doses." "Did you tell him what it's doing to Lyra?" "I did." He wept, said he had suspicions but was too afraid to voice them. "Serafina has leverage over him, his family, his position." Lucian turned to face Cass. "I asked if he would testify at the gala, confirm that the medicine is toxic. He refused, said Serafina would destroy him." "Then we need evidence she can't deny, something irrefutable." "Like what?" Cass thought. "Your wife, Isolde. You said she died of blood fever. Were there medical records?" "Autopsy reports, sealed by order of the High Council, standard procedure for royal deaths." "Who performed the autopsy?" Lucian went very still. "Dr. Corbin." "And who signed off on the cause of death?" Serafina, as Isolda's next of kin and medical proxy. The pieces were falling into place. "We need those autopsy reports," Cass said. "If Serafina killed Isolda the same way she's been poisoning Lyra, the reports would show iron in Isolda's system. Vampires cannot process iron. It's toxic to us. Causes organ failure that mimics blood fever." Lucian's eyes blazed crimson. "Serafina murdered my wife. Can you get the reports?" "They're in the council archives, under seal. Breaking that seal without authorization would be necessary," Cass finished. "We have 1 day until the gala. 1 day to prove Serafina has been committing murder and embezzlement for 8 decades. We need those reports." Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a predator's smile. "I know someone who owes me a favor, and who has access to the archives." The night before the gala, everything came together. Elder Wilhelm arrived at Corvus Hall at midnight, ancient, golden-eyed, carrying a leather satchel. "You are calling in a very old debt, Lucian," the elder said as he entered the study. "I hope you know what you are asking." "I am asking for justice," Lucian replied. "Nothing more." Wilhelm set the satchel on the desk, pulled out a file, old yellowed pages, official seals. "Isolda Corvus, autopsy report, October 1944. Cass opened it, read quickly, her medical training parsing the old terminology. There. Cause of death, blood fever, secondary to childbirth complications. But in the toxicology panel, buried in the footnotes, elevated iron levels, 47 parts per million. Normal vampire range, 0 to 5 parts per million. "Iron poisoning," Cass said, "disguised as blood fever." Wilhelm nodded slowly. "When I pulled this file, I read it fully for the first time in 80 years. I missed this the first time. We all did. Because we trusted the diagnosis." "Who signed it?" Lucian asked, though his voice said he already knew. "Dr. Elias Corbin, countersigned by Lady Serafina Vale as medical proxy." Lucian's hands clenched into fists. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. 80 years, he whispered. 80 years she let me believe I failed to protect Isolda, that I somehow caused her death. And all along, she poisoned your wife, Wilhelm finished, and then poisoned your daughter to hide the evidence, to ensure Lyra could never inherit, never challenge Serafina's control of the estate. The elder looked at them both. "Tomorrow's gala will not be a simple assessment. It will be a trial. Serafina has been building her case for years. She has 7 council members in her pocket. She will move to have Lyra institutionalized and you removed." "Then we move first," Cass said. Wilhelm raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "We present evidence. The autopsy. The medicine. We bring Lyra before the council, not as a broken child, but as a functioning, aware heir who's been deliberately incapacitated." "Can the child speak?" Wilhelm asked. "Can she demonstrate awareness?" "She can," Lucian said quietly. "She has been learning, in secret, for the last 4 days." "Then you have a chance." Wilhelm stood. "But understand this. Serafina will fight with everything she has, and she has been planning this for 80 years. Do not underestimate her." He left the file on the desk and walked to the door. "One more thing," Wilhelm said. "I will vote in your favor, but I am only one of 12. You need 6 others. Make your case well, old friend. You will not get a second chance." The morning of the gala, Cass helped Lyra dress. The midnight blue velvet gown looked like starlight against the child's pale skin. Her platinum hair was braided with silver thread. She looked like a princess, but her hands were shaking. "Scared," she whispered. "I know," Cass said, kneeling to her level. "But you are ready. Remember what we practiced, the volume dial, your father's heartbeat. You control the noise, not the other way around." What if I fail? Then I will be right there to catch you. Your father will be there. You are not alone, Lyra. Not anymore." The child looked at her with those ancient violet eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me when no one else did." Cass felt her throat tighten. "Thank you for trusting me." A knock at the door. Lucian entered. He wore formal attire, black suit, silver cravat. He looked every inch the lord, but his eyes were soft when they landed on his daughter. "Lyra," he said quietly, "you look like your mother." Lyra's breath caught. "You never say. Her name?" "Isolde." Lucian crossed the room, knelt beside them both. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She faced down vampire hunters, political coups, and the London Blitz without flinching. And when I look at you now, I see her courage in your eyes." He took Lyra's small hands in his. "Whatever happens today, know this. I am proud of you. Not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. My daughter, my heir, my heart." Lyra threw her arms around his neck. "Papa," she whispered, "I love you." Lucian's eyes closed. "I love you too, baby girl, always." They stayed like that for a long moment, a father and daughter reunited after 80 years of silence. Then Lucian stood, offered his hand to Lyra. "Ready?" She took his hand, looked at Cass, nodded. "Ready." Together the three of them walked to the grand staircase. Below, the Covenant Gala had begun. The great hall of Corvus Hall blazed with light. Every chandelier lit, crystals refracting illumination into 1,000 points. Black candles floated in midair, defying gravity. A string quartet played Vivaldi from a raised dais, the music weaving through conversation. 200 vampires in formal wear, silk and velvet, diamonds and rubies. Predators dressed as aristocrats, sipping blood wine from crystal glasses. And at the far end of the hall, seated in high-backed chairs, the 12 members of the High Council. Elder Wilhelm in the center, Lord Ravencroft to his right, ancient German vampire, black eyes, severe expression. Lady Morgause to his left, British, silver hair, cold smile. The others arrayed around them, vampires from Paris, Rome, Cairo, Tokyo, Mumbai, Vienna, Prague, St. Petersburg, the rulers of the immortal world. Cass stood at the top of the stairs with Lyra and Lucian, looking down at the assembly. "Second thoughts?" Lucian murmured. "Several thousand," Cass replied, "but we're past the point of no return." "Indeed we are." The quartet finished their piece. Silence fell. Lucian raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried across the hall, "I present my daughter, Lyra Isolde Corvus, heir to the Corvus bloodline." The music resumed, a waltz, Strauss, beautiful and complex. And to Lyra, Cass knew, it must sound like a sledgehammer. They descended the stairs together, slowly, carefully. Lyra's hand in Cass's was trembling, but she didn't cover her ears, didn't shut down. She was controlling the dial, turning down the volume, focusing on her father's heartbeat, walking beside her, step by step. They reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted. A path opened to the council's dais. Lord Ravencroft stood. His formal robes were blood-red, embroidered with gold. He looked like a hanging judge. "Lord Corvus," he said, his German accent clipped, "the council has convened to assess the fitness of your heir. As is tradition, we must determine if the child is capable of inheriting the responsibilities of your station." "I understand," Lucian said. "Then you will not object to our examination." Ravencroft approached Lyra, studied her with those black pit eyes. "The child appears well-groomed, but appearances mean little. We must assess cognition, awareness, response to stimuli." He pulled a small silver bell from his robes. "If she is truly deaf, as reported by Lady Seraphina and confirmed by royal physicians, this will mean nothing to her." He rang the bell, a clear, pure tone. Every vampire in the room watched Lyra. She didn't flinch, didn't react at all. Her face was perfectly blank. Ravencroft frowned. "As expected, the child is—" He rang the bell again, harder, the tone sharper, louder. Lyra's jaw tightened, but she held still. "Curious," Ravencroft said. Most deaf children show no awareness whatsoever. This one appears to be enduring something. He rang it a third time, right next to Lyra's ear. The sound was piercing. Lyra's control slipped for half a second. Her eyes squeezed shut. And then a crash. A waiter, carrying a tray of crystal glasses, stumbled. The tray fell. Glass shattered on marble, the sound exploding through the hall like gunfire. Every vampire barely noticed. But Lyra. The sensory overload hit her like a physical blow. 4 days of control, 5 days of withdrawal, and suddenly it wasn't enough. Her eyes opened. They were glowing, bright violet, incandescent. Her mouth opened, and the scream that came out wasn't vocal. It was sonic. A wave of pure sound rippled through the air like a shock wave. Lord Ravencroft was thrown backward 20 feet, slamming into the council's dais hard enough to crack the wood. The floating candles exploded, black wax raining down. The windows shattered inward, all of them, simultaneously, glass cascading like a crystal waterfall. Vampires dropped to their knees, hands over their ears, faces contorted in agony. Even centuries-old immortals, used to violence, couldn't withstand the acoustic assault. The sound kept building. Tables overturned, paintings fell from walls, the chandelier swayed dangerously. Lyra rose off the ground, floating, debris swirling around her, her hair whipping in an invisible wind, her eyes blazing like stars. She was crying, terrified, out of control. And from across the hall, Seraphina's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Kill her! Kill the monster before she destroys us all!" Guards rushed forward, silver spears drawn. Lucian roared, moving to intercept, but Cass was faster. She ran into the vortex of sound and fury. The pressure was immense, like being inside a jet engine. Her nose started bleeding. Her ears screamed. Every bone in her body vibrated. She didn't care. She reached Lyra, grabbed the child, pulled her close. "Lyra!" she shouted, though the words were lost in the sonic storm. "Look at me! Look at me!" Lyra's glowing eyes found hers. Cass pressed Lyra's hand to her chest. Let the child feel her heartbeat. Then she did the only thing she could think of. She sang, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Her voice was drowned out by the chaos, but Lyra could hear it, could feel the vibrations. The sonic wind began to slow. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." Glass stopped falling. The shaking stopped. The roar died down to a whisper. Lyra collapsed into Cass's arms, sobbing, the glow fading from her eyes. Silence crashed back down. Cass knelt on the floor of the destroyed ballroom, holding a shaking child, blood running from her nose. 200 vampires stared in stunned silence, and Seraphina's voice, sharp as broken glass. "You see? The child is a weapon, uncontrollable, dangerous. Lucian has failed in his duties. She must be institutionalized for the safety of the Covenant, and her father must be removed from his position before his negligence destroys us all." The crowd murmured. Agreement rippled through the hall. Seraphina stood at the edge of the destruction, her crimson dress unstained, her expression perfectly calculated. "I invoke Emergency Succession Protocol, Article 7. When a lord demonstrates gross incompetence, the council may vote for immediate replacement." She pulled a document from inside her dress, cream parchment, sealed with red wax. "Furthermore, I present Lord Corvus's formal abdication, signed 3 days ago. He acknowledges his failure and surrenders his title willingly." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Lucian's face went white. "That is a forgery." "Your signature says otherwise." Seraphina broke the seal, unfolded the document, held it up for the council to see. "Witnessed by Mrs. Thorne and Dr. Elias Corbin. Legal and binding." Elder Wilhelm took the document, examined it with golden eyes that had read treaties for 1,000 years. "The signature appears authentic," he said slowly. His gaze shifted to Lucian. "Did you sign this?" "No." "Then someone has committed fraud." Wilhelm's voice was quiet, but it carried. "A capital offense. Seraphina's smile didn't waver. Or Lord Corvus is lying, protecting his position through denial. Either way, the council must vote. 7 members have already pledged their support for my regency. I have the votes. Then vote, Lucian said quietly. Wilhelm looked at the other council members. Emergency succession protocol. All in favor of removing Lord Lucian Corvus and installing Lady Seraphina Vale as regent? 7 hands rose, exactly as Seraphina had said. Wilhelm's expression didn't change. 7 in favor, 4 opposed, 1 abstention, myself. By simple majority, the motion passes. He looked at Lucian. However, Wilhelm continued, there is a procedural complication. Article 14 of the 1823 Covenant Charter states that in cases where criminal malfeasance is alleged, removal requires not simple majority, but unanimous council decision. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. There are no criminal allegations here. Dr. Brennan? Wilhelm's gaze shifted to Cass. You had something you wished to present? Cass stood slowly, still holding Lyra. Her nose was still bleeding, but her voice was steady. I'm alleging criminal malfeasance, multiple counts, against Lady Seraphina Vale. The hall went dead silent. Specifically, Cass continued, the murder of Queen Isolde Corvus in 1944, the attempted murder of Princess Lyra through 80 years of poisoning, and embezzlement of $600 million from the Corvus estate. Seraphina laughed. It was a beautiful sound, like silver bells. Ridiculous. The desperate fantasies of a human who's been fired and is trying to save her employment. Then you won't mind if Dr. Corbin testifies to the contents of the medicine you've been prescribing? Dr. Corbin prepared the medicine under my supervision, using formulas approved by— Using formulas you provided, a new voice interrupted. Doctor. Elias Corbin stepped out of the crowd. He looked terrible, pale, shaking, but determined. For 80 years I have compounded the tincture Lady Seraphina prescribed for Princess Lyra. She told me it was to ease the child's suffering, but the formula she gave me contains nightshade, lead acetate, hemlock, and mandrake, in quantities that would kill a human and lobotomize a vampire. The crowd gasped. Seraphina's perfect composure cracked, just slightly. You lying! I have the formulas, Corbin continued, pulling papers from his coat. Every compound I've made for the last 8 decades. Documented, dated, all bearing Lady Seraphina's signature and seal. He handed them to Wilhelm. The ancient vampire examined them. His expression darkened. These dosages are— Wilhelm looked up. Dr. Corbin, as royal physician, do you attest that these compounds would cause permanent neurological damage? I do. And yet you prepared them anyway. Yes, Corbin's voice broke. Lady Seraphina threatened my family, my position. I was a coward, but I cannot stay silent anymore. He pulled out another document, older, yellowed. And there's this, Queen Isolde's medical file, from 1944. I diagnosed her death as blood fever. But it was a lie. He handed it to Wilhelm. The autopsy showed iron poisoning, 47 parts per million. Vampires can't process iron. It causes organ failure that mimics blood fever. Someone was poisoning Queen Isolde for months before her death. Lies! Seraphina's voice was shrill now. This is a conspiracy. The human has manipulated him, just as she's manipulated Lucian. Then explain the pharmacy records, Corbin said. He pulled out a ledger. Ancient, leather-bound. Iron sulfate purchases, billed to Lady Seraphina Vale, monthly, from January 1944 to October 1944, the exact period when Queen Isolde was showing symptoms. He handed the ledger to Wilhelm. The silence in the hall was absolute. Wilhelm examined the records, page by page. Then he looked at Seraphina. Lady Vale, these documents suggest you poisoned your sister over the course of 9 months, then poisoned her daughter for the next 80 years, to embezzle the Corvus fortune. Do you have a defense? Seraphina's mask shattered, her face twisted with rage, with old pain. Defense? She screamed. You want to know my defense? Isolde stole everything from me. I loved Lucian first, before she even knew he existed. but vampire society demanded he marry the proper sister, the pure one, the perfect one. She looked at Lucian with eyes full of venom. I gave her the iron because she didn't deserve you, because I deserved to be Lady Corvus, not her. And when that failed, when you still mourned her instead of turning to me, I made sure the child would never inherit, made sure I would control the fortune, because I earned it. Her voice echoed through the destroyed hall. For 80 years I built an empire from your grief, and I'd do it again, because Isolde was weak, the child is broken, and I am better. The confession hung in the air. Wilhelm's expression was stone. Lady Seraphina Vale, he said quietly, you have just admitted before 200 witnesses and the entire High Council to premeditated murder and attempted murder. Do you comprehend what you've done? Seraphina stared at him, then at the assembled vampires, then at Lucian, and she realized she'd lost. No, she whispered. No, I didn't mean— Guards, Wilhelm said. Detain her. The guards moved forward. Seraphina backed away. You can't. I have 7 votes. I have the majority. You had 7 votes, Wilhelm corrected, before you confessed to capital crimes. Now? He looked at the council members who'd supported her. Who among you still votes for this woman's regency? Silence. All 7 hands stayed down. Motion fails, Wilhelm said. Lord Lucian Corvus retains his position. Princess Lyra Corvus is confirmed as heir, and Lady Seraphina Vale is under arrest for— Seraphina moved. Vampire speed. Inhuman. She crossed the distance to the nearest guard in a blur, grabbed his silver spear, spun, and held the weapon to her own throat. Stop! Her voice cracked. Everyone stop or I'll do it. Silver through the jugular. I'll be dead before you can stop me. The guards froze. Wilhelm held up a hand. Lady Vale, this solves nothing. It solves everything. Seraphina laughed, high and broken. You think I'll spend eternity in a cell, alone, while Lucian lives happily with his precious daughter? Never, never. She looked at Lyra, still in Cass's arms. If I can't have the fortune, if I can't have him, then none of you will. She reached into her dress with her free hand, pulled out a small glass sphere. Golden light swirled inside it, too bright to look at directly. UV grenade, concentrated sunlight, illegal under 3 different treaties. One of those could turn every vampire in a 50-foot radius to ash. The crowd stampeded backward. Screams. Chaos. Seraphina held it up, her thumb on the trigger. Everyone stops, her voice echoed, or I detonate this and we all burn together. She was cornered, desperate, and desperate predators were the most dangerous kind. The room froze. Seraphina smiled through her tears. Here's what happens now. You vote for my regency. All of you. Unanimously. Or I drop this grenade and end the High Council, the Corvus line, and 200 of the most powerful vampires in the world. You'll die too, Lucian said quietly. I don't care anymore, Seraphina screamed. I've spent 80 years pretending to care about this family, this estate, this endless game. I'm done. Vote for me, or we all burn. Wilhelm looked at the other council members. Silent communication passed between them. We need time to deliberate. No time! Seraphina's thumb twitched on the trigger. Vote now, or— From the dungeons below, an explosion. The floor shook. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. Everyone looked down, then up, then at Lucian, who smiled. You forgot something, Seraphina, he said quietly. You're not the only one who's been planning. The dungeon door exploded outward. Smoke poured into the hall, and through it walked Lucian. Wait. No. Lucian was standing right there next to Cass and Lyra. But walking out of the smoke was Lucian, identical. Same height, same face, same violet eyes. The Lucian standing by Cass shimmered and transformed into a different man, shorter, blonde, unfamiliar. Illusion spell. The real Lucian's voice came from the dungeon entrance, cast by a very talented warlock I hired 3 days ago. When you thought you were seeing me at council meetings, you were seeing him. He stepped into the light, clothes torn, skin burned where blessed silver had touched, but alive, free. While you were building your case, I was building mine, gathering evidence, securing testimony, breaking into the council archives with Wilhelm's help. He walked toward Serafina. She stumbled back, the grenade shaking in her hand. "Stay back!" "No." Lucian kept walking. "You murdered my wife. You tortured my daughter. You stole 80 years of her childhood, and you did it for money." "I did it for love!" Serafina shrieked. "I loved you. I deserved you." "You deserved nothing," Lucian said softly. "And now you lose everything." Serafina's face twisted. "Then we all lose." She raised the grenade. "Lyra," Cass said quietly, "remember what we practiced, the volume dial. What if instead of turning it down, you turned it off completely?" Lyra looked at her. Understanding dawned in those violet eyes. "Just for a few seconds," Cass continued. "Can you do that?" Lyra took a breath, opened her mouth, and sang. It wasn't a scream this time. It was a note. Pure, crystalline, impossibly high. The frequency of silence itself. The air in the room changed. Sound didn't disappear. It inverted. The song created a bubble of anti-noise, a void where acoustic energy went to die. Serafina's mouth moved, but no words came out. The grenade in her hand pulsed, its golden light flickering, the chemical reaction inside trying to activate but finding no sound to catalyze it. And in that 3-second window of impossible quiet, Cass moved. She'd done hand-to-hand combat training at Fort Benning, disarmed insurgents holding live grenades in Fallujah. The technique was simple: redirect the threat, control the weapon, neutralize the hostile. She covered the distance in 2 steps, grabbed Serafina's wrist, twisted hard. The grenade flew from the vampire's hand, arcing through the air. Lucian caught it. Vampire reflexes. Impossibly fast. He crushed the glass sphere in his bare hand. The UV light spilled out, burning his palm, smoke rising. But without sound to trigger the chain reaction, it just fizzled. The light died. Lyra stopped singing. Sound crashed back like a physical wave. Serafina rounded on Cass with a snarl, fangs bared, eyes blazing crimson. But Cass had fought vampires before. Not with strength, with intelligence. She grabbed a shard of broken mirror from the floor, silver-backed, drove it up into Serafina's shoulder. The vampire screamed. Not from pain, vampires didn't feel pain like humans, from silver poisoning. The metal was burning through Serafina's system like acid, weakening her, making her mortal in all the ways that mattered. She stumbled back, clawing at the shard. Lucian was there. He grabbed his sister-in-law, spun her around, slammed her to the ground, pinned her with one knee on her back, his hand on her throat. 80 years, he said, his voice soft and terrible. 80 years you let me believe I failed Isolde, that I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, good enough to save her. He pressed down harder. You poisoned my wife. Lucian, please. And you poisoned my daughter, made her a prisoner in her own mind, stole her childhood, her voice, her life, for money. His hand tightened. Serafina gasped, clawing at his grip. Lucian! Wilhelm's voice cut through. That's enough. She will stand trial. Lucian looked up. His eyes were crimson, feral. For a moment Cass thought he would ignore the elder, would snap Serafina's neck right there. But slowly, incrementally, he released her, stood, stepped back. Guards rushed forward, wrapped blessed silver chains around Serafina's wrists and ankles. She writhed, screaming, but they held her fast. Wilhelm walked to the center of the destroyed hall. Lady Serafina Vale, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. You stand accused of regicide, attempted murder of a minor, embezzlement of covenant assets, and attempted mass murder with a prohibited weapon. How do you plead? Serafina laughed. Even pinned, even defeated, she laughed. Guilty, she said. Of all of it, and I'd do it again. Wilhelm nodded. Then there is nothing more to say. Council, vote, death or imprisonment. Imprisonment, said the first council member. Imprisonment, said the second. One by one, All 12 voted. Unanimous. 200 years, Wilhelm pronounced. Solitary confinement in the Geneva vault. No visitors, no communication, no appeals. Sentence to begin immediately. He looked at the guards. Take her. They dragged Serafina away. She was still laughing, but it sounded hollow now. Broken. The hall was silent. Then Wilhelm turned to Lyra. The child stood beside Cass, small and pale, her hand gripping the doctor's tightly. Princess Lyra Corvus, Wilhelm said, his voice gentler now. What you did just now, the Song of Silence. Where did you learn that? Lyra's voice was small but clear. I didn't learn. I just knew. The world is so loud. Sometimes I need it quiet. So I make it quiet. Wilhelm knelt, put himself at her level. You have a rare gift, child. The siren's voice, we call it. Once every 1,000 years, a vampire is born with it. They can shape sound itself. Most go mad from the power. He studied her. But you learned control in less than a week. Dr. Cass taught me, Lyra said. And Papa. Wilhelm looked at Lucian, then at Cass. This human. She is your physician? She is my daughter's guardian protector, Lucian said, and the only reason Lyra is alive. Wilhelm stood slowly. The council will vote on the succession. Lord Corvus, do you wish to retain your title? I do. And your heir? Lyra. Always Lyra. Wilhelm looked at the other council members. Show of hands, all in favor of maintaining the Corvus succession, with Princess Lyra Isolde Corvus confirmed as heir? 12 hands rose. Unanimous. Then it is settled. Wilhelm's voice rang through the hall. Let it be known throughout the immortal world. Lyra Isolde Corvus is confirmed heir to the Corvus bloodline. Her father remains lord, and anyone who questions this decision will answer to the full council. He walked toward the exit, then paused. Oh, and Lord Corvus? I suggest you retain Dr. Brennan's services. Permanently. The Covenant has need of people who can teach control to those who believe they have none. He left. The other council members followed, and slowly, carefully, the assembled vampires began to file out. The gala was over. The crisis resolved. Lucian stood alone in the destroyed hall, covered in blood and ash, his daughter holding a human woman's hand. He crossed to them, knelt down in front of Cass, not in private this time, in public, before 200 witnesses. You saved her life, he said quietly. You gave me back my daughter. You brought my family back from 80 years of darkness. Name your price, Dr. Brennan. Anything in my power to give. Cass looked at him, at this ancient, powerful creature kneeling before a mortal. Emma's medical bills, she said. All of them. The experimental treatment, the hospital care, everything. Paid in full by morning. What else? The $500,000 bonus you promised. In your account within the hour. What else? Cass looked at Lyra. The child was smiling, a tiny, tentative thing, but real. I want the job. Permanent. Guardian protector. $250,000 a year. Plus housing, medical benefits, and a pension. Lucian smiled. It was the first genuine smile Cass had seen from him. $300,000. Plus full dental, plus a company car, plus stock options in Corvus Industries, plus a seat on my advisory council. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal, Dr. Brennan? Cass shook it. Deal. Lyra looked up at her father. Her voice was stronger now. Papa, can Dr. Cass stay? Forever? Lucian scooped his daughter into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go. Forever, he promised. Lyra turned in his arms, looking at Cass. And Emma? Can she visit? Cass felt her throat tighten. You want to meet Emma? You talk about her. In your sleep. Lyra's smile was shy. She sounds nice. She is nice. And she's going to love you. Lyra's smile widened. Then she did something that made every vampire remaining in the hall stare. She laughed. Pure, joyful, childlike laughter. the sound of a little girl who'd spent 80 years in silence, finally free. 3 months later, January 2025. Snow fell soft and steady over Corvus Hall, transforming the Gothic mansion into something almost gentle, almost warm. Inside, in what was once a cold nursery, but was now a proper child's room, Lyra sat at a piano. Her platinum hair was tied back with a blue ribbon. She wore jeans and a sweater. Cass had banned the uncomfortable lace dresses. The piano was specially modified, soundproofed room, padded hammers on the keys. Lyra could play without the notes overwhelming her. She played Moonlight Sonata now, her small fingers finding the keys with careful precision. Not perfect. She was still learning, but beautiful. Cass sat in a chair nearby, reviewing applications. The Covenant had approved her proposal. The Initiative for Exceptional Youth, a program for vampire children with unusual abilities, teaching them control instead of suppression. They had 12 applicants already. The door opened. A small figure bounded in, all energy and joy. Emma, 8 years old, hair growing back, thick and dark. The experimental treatment was working. Remission, 90% chance of full recovery. She carried a stuffed bear under one arm. "Aunt Cass! Lyra! Come see! It's snowing so much!" Lyra stopped playing, looked at Emma with a smile that still came easier every day. "Can we build another snowman?" "Bundle up first," Cass said. "I don't need 2 patients with pneumonia." The girls ran off, giggling. Lucian appeared in the doorway, watching them go. He wore a simple black sweater and slacks. No formal attire at home anymore. "She is thriving," he said softly. "They both are." Cass set down her papers. Emma's white blood cell count is the highest it's been in 2 years. Lyra's control improves daily. Last week she went to a movie theater, sat through the whole film without using her volume dial once. "Because of you." Cass shrugged. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Lucian said. He walked into the room, picked up a photograph from Lyra's desk. Lyra, Emma, and Cass at the Boston Aquarium, all smiling. "You are doing more than a job. You are giving my daughter a childhood, one she should have had 80 years ago." He set down the photo. "In 650 years, I have fought in a dozen wars, survived plagues, inquisitions, political coups. I have commanded armies and ruled territories." He looked at Cass. "But I never learned the most important thing." "What's that?" "How to listen." He smiled, sad and grateful. "I spent 80 years trying to force Lyra to hear me. And you taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is be quiet and let someone else speak." From outside, laughter. The girls playing in the snow. "She talks constantly now," Lucian said. "Stories about her day, things she's learning, dreams she has." His voice thickened. "Last night, she told me she wants to be a teacher when she grows up, for deaf children, so they never feel alone." Cass smiled. "She'll be amazing at it." She learned from the best. They stood together at the window, watching Lyra and Emma build a snow fort. "The council contacted me yesterday," Lucian said. "They want to expand the initiative, open facilities in London, Vienna, Tokyo. They're offering you oversight of all of them." Cass looked at him sharply. "All of them?" "Director of Global Operations, 500,000 annually, full staff, unlimited budget." He smiled. "They're impressed with what you've accomplished. 12 children enrolled, 11 showing significant improvement. 1, Lyra, fully integrated into normal life. That's a lot of responsibility. You've been commanding field hospitals under fire since you were 25. You can handle this." Cass watched the girls. Lyra was teaching Emma how to make perfect snowballs, demonstrating the proper packing technique with intense focus. "What do you think?" Lucian asked. "I think," Cass said slowly, "that a year ago I was drowning in debt and watching my niece die. Now I'm being offered the chance to help hundreds of kids like Lyra, kids who've been told they're broken when they're actually just different." She looked at him. "When do I start?" 5 years later. The Covenant Initiative for Exceptional Youth now had facilities on 4 continents. 247 children enrolled. Success rate, 92%. Dr. Cassandra Brennan, age 47, stood at the podium of the International Vampire Council Summit in Geneva. Behind her, a presentation showed statistics, case studies, testimonials. But the slide that received the longest applause was simple: a photograph. Lyra Corvus, age 13 in appearance, standing in front of a classroom of deaf children, teaching sign language. Smiling. The girl once called broken, now helping others find their voices. The presentation ended. The council gave Cass a standing ovation. Afterward, at the reception, Elder Wilhelm approached. "You have done something remarkable, Dr. Brennan," he said. "You have shown us that the things we fear most often hold the greatest potential, if only we are brave enough to listen." "I just treated them like kids," Cass said. "Turned out that was revolutionary." Wilhelm smiled. "Indeed." Later, Cass stood on the balcony of the Geneva facility, looking out over the city. Her phone buzzed. "Emma. Got accepted to Harvard Pre-Med, following in your footsteps, Aunt Cass." Cass felt tears prick her eyes. Emma. Alive. Thriving. 21 years old and choosing to heal, just like she'd been healed. Another text, this one from Lyra. "Taught my class today. 15 students. All of them learned the alphabet. I'm so proud. Miss you. When are you coming home?" Cass typed back. 2 days. Save me a hug." She looked at the city lights, thought about a rainy October night 6 years ago, standing at iron gates, desperate and afraid, taking a job because she had no other choice, not knowing it would change everything. The final lesson. In the study at Corvus Hall, on the mantel above the fireplace, 2 objects sat side by side in a glass case: a Purple Heart medal, tarnished with age, earned on D-Day, 1944, and a small crystal vial. Empty, the one that had held poison for 80 years. Above them, a bronze plaque read, "Honor is earned through action, not birth. Strength is found in listening, not speaking. And sometimes the voices society calls broken are the only ones powerful enough to heal what is truly shattered." In memory of Queen Isolde Corvus, 1920 to 1944, and in celebration of Lyra Corvus, the silent heir who found her voice. Because what the world calls defective is often exactly what the world needs most. Every child who entered the initiative saw those words. Every parent who brought a broken child seeking help read them and understood that the most powerful force in the world wasn't magic or immortality or ancient bloodlines. It was the choice to see a person as a person, to treat power with respect instead of fear, to build walls not to keep people out, but to help them control what was inside. 6 years after that October night, Dr. Cassandra Brennan learned something her military training had never taught her: that some battles aren't won with weapons or strategies or superior firepower. They're won by kneeling before those who are struggling and saying, "I see you, I hear you, and I will fight for you." Lord Lucian Corvus learned that in his 650 years, the greatest act of strength wasn't surviving wars or accumulating power. It was admitting he needed help and trusting a desperate human to save what he could not save alone. And Lyra Corvus learned that the voice society had called broken for 80 years was never broken at all. It was just waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful force in the world isn't a scream, it's a song. And the people willing to teach others how to sing, the doctors who take desperate jobs, the fathers who kneel before strangers, the children who refuse to stay silent, are the ones who change the world. One voice at a time.